Let's talk about the rules of engagement. The rules of engagement are really about establishing the nature of the way in which your relationship with your prospect or potential prospect is actually going to play out. Now, how do we do that? How do we do this in a nice way, and how do we do it in an effective way? This is really what we call within Sandler the upfront contract. Now, when we talk about an upfront contract, I'm not talking about a written document. I'm talking about a verbal agreement which is enforceable between you and the prospect that establishes the professional nature of the relationship that you're going to have. It establishes certain ground rules for how that relationship is going to be conducted. And most importantly, it achieves certain goals, such as making sure that you don't end up in their system, that basically you stay within a system that is within your control so that you actually get the right sorts of outcomes for both parties. So this is about an equal relationship between you and the prospect. It's about making sure that you conduct the relationship effectively. What are the sorts of things that can go wrong if you don't have that upfront contract, if you don't have those rules of engagement clearly established? Well, firstly, you can go wildly off track. I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but sometimes you can have meetings where you come out of it an hour, 2 hours later, maybe a lot longer than you actually thought it was going to be, having really not discussed the things that you needed to discuss. It can be very frustrating for both parties, and even though you might have enjoyed the meeting, the chances are that the very next time they think about putting a meeting in the diary with you, they're going to think, well, I really did enjoy that meeting, but I'm not so sure I got what I needed to get out of it. I'll have to bump that one in the diary. Because, meetings with you might be pleasant, but ineffective. Other things that can happen is you go into a meeting and their guard is up because they feel like you're there to try and sell them something. Now, if they feel that's the case, if they feel like you're just going to try some ninja sales move on them, then they might be a little bit less open to having a proper discussion, which really helps you to discover what's really going on in their world. Which means that, they've got a little bit of anxiety, and the way to lower that anxiety is really to kind of establish up front exactly what's going to happen. Because one of the things that might happen is that actually you might establish there's no reason to do business. In which case they have no reason to feel threatened, because you've established that very clearly up front. So what does an upfront contract actually look like? Well, the first part of an upfront contract is really about confirming the time that you've actually got allocated for the meeting. So very, very simple. You say something like, Mr. Prospect, Mrs. Prospect, Miss Prospect, I've got an hour of logged into my diary for this meeting. Is that still okay for you? That's what I've got in my calendar. Is that still all right? And if they say yes, well, that's fine. If they say no, well, you might want to take a consideration of maybe even rescheduling the meeting, because in order to get into a proper conversation, it's probably going to take at least an hour. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it takes 90 minutes. But if it does going to take 90 minutes, do agree that up front. That's the point of the upfront contract. The second thing you need to talk about is the agenda. What is it we're actually here to discuss? In very broad strokes, are we here to talk about XYZ business challenge that we talked about on the phone, or that we talked about in our interaction on LinkedIn? And then get into the details. Say, okay, what do you need to see, hear, or feel from me over the course of the next 60 to 90 minutes, whatever it was you agreed in time, in order to make this a good use of your time? And then tell them the sorts of things that you're going to need from the meeting, including actually asking permission to ask questions, because, as we've already established, unless you really understand what's happening in their world, you're not going to be able to help them. So you're going to need permission to ask them some fairly direct questions to know what's actually happening in their world, to understand their problems, and more importantly, the impact of those problems. Then finally, you want to be talking about the potential outcomes, the things that the prospect can expect to happen towards the back end of this meeting. And one of those things is that actually they might be signing on the dotted line saying yes. But you don't necessarily want to say, you might say yes to me straight away, because that sounds a little bit pushy. So start off by saying, well, one of the things that I know for sure is that we're not right for everybody. That being the case, during the course of this meeting, one or other of us might come to the conclusion that this isn't going to go anywhere. In which case, hopefully, we'll both feel comfortable telling each other that. Is that okay? It's establishing the fact that no is a valid outcome from this meeting. And we already know, don't we, that actually most people are not going to turn out to be your clients. So establish that up front. Be disarmingly honest. Tell them something that is apparently not in your own best interest before going on to talk about the things that are in your best interest. What is in your best interest is saying, well, if we're not saying no to each other, then I suppose as we get to the last 5-6 minutes of this meeting, we might well be saying yes to each other. In which case, shall we take those last 5 or 6 minutes just to map out what that yes might look like? And of course, what that yes might look like is it might be another meeting. But if it is going to be another meeting, make sure it's very clearly defined. Make sure that you have an upfront contract for what the next meeting is going to be as well. So that's the rules of engagement. If you don't have an upfront contract, then you're not in your system, you're in theirs. And that's not a good place to be.